Good evening. Let's start today. We're going to start the second day of Iraq, and this is Al-Abadi's presentation. He just finished his presentation, and let's continue to listen following the video, about 30 minutes. And I'm going to explain what his question and his answers. Okay, let's have a look. Let's go and start. Okay.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you for those comments. And we now have an opportunity to have a conversation, and I've already received a sheaf of questions that people are eager to ask of you. But maybe we can start with what probably is on many people's minds. You've come directly from the White House to this event. What are your reflections on that conversation? Did you hear what you needed to from President Trump and how plans are going?
Well, the important thing for us was that we see an administration and a president who see and appreciate what we're...
Oh, he met Trump. Okay, so he's talking about what kind of meeting he had done, right?
And give us support and or continue the support. Mm-hmm. And I think we have seen plenty of that. I think the administration and the president recognizes the importance of Iraq, the role Iraq played in Iraq and in the region, and we have been given assurances that the support will not only continue, but will accelerate for Iraq to accomplish the task. I think we are happy with the meetings, and we're happy with the meeting with you here, and we're looking forward to meeting Congress as well, and others other companies. I've seen a lot of interest. I've heard now there is the double of the number.
Okay, by the way, he is talking about just a meeting with Mr. Trump and the meeting with several members of Congress, but actually America destroyed every kind of infrastructure in Iraq. Okay? It's a many years war, and they just destroyed everything. So nothing in Iraq, right? Iraq. So, but he cannot speak of that kind of who is the responsibility for those reconstruction of this country, right? He can tell the truth, right?
A lot of companies who have shown interest to work inside Iraq, and we're meeting them today as well. And we hope through this cooperation in trade, commerce, energy, education, culture, other aspects, I think we build a better relationship between Iraq and the United States.
And you are here, of course, for the anti-ISIS conference. What do you most want out of that?
Well, there's a problem here. Well, it's to do with terrorism. Now, some countries, unfortunately, they see terrorism, well, when it's against them, they see them as terrorism. When it is not, maybe the same group acting somewhere else, they see them in different style. They don't consider them as terrorists. I'm not happy with a lot of outlets, media outlets in the region, who are still providing support for terrorists under different names. Terrorism is an ugly phenomena. We have seen it in Iraq. It split families. It split communities. It destroys whole life of people. It destroys infrastructure. Now is our ministry worked on the cost of the damage Daesh caused before. This is before Nainawa. Nainawa is not included.
He said the Daesh, okay? Daesh is ISIS. Not Daesh. Daesh means ISIS.
Our ministry worked on the cost of the damage Daesh caused before.
Okay.
Oh, this is before Nainawa. Nainawa is not included. It's about $35 billion to the Iraqi economy. That's not counting the effect on the public at large. That's only in terms of infrastructure and others. So I hope we see it that way. I still don't see a coherent media campaign against Daesh. Still, yes, regionally. Still, Daesh are receiving funds. There are still recruits are coming from all over to Daesh. Yes, it's declining. At the moment, young people are not going for it.
But at this time, still, this year's March, it means still ISIL existed. That's the reason why he's talking about recruiting. But my point is, actually, consider back to the several years ago, America supported actually ISIL. Saudi Arabia supported ISIL. There are a lot of weaponry gave to the anti-Syria government people, militant, but actually those weaponry is delivered to ISIL actually. So it means America is at this means or intentionally, or I'm not sure, but actually ISIL weapon came from the United States anyway. So my guess is America supported ISIL to turmoil in Middle East, and they don't expect the Middle East going to be stable. They expect them they are much more unstable. Is better for America. Okay, so that's currently Iran is the same scenario. America don't want Iran will going to govern into Middle East, so they try to support Saudi Arabia against Iran. So Iraq, this Abadi he can't criticize the United States because he expects something from the United States for investment. But actually, America has scratched everything in Iraq. Right? And going back to the Saddam Hussein, how come they attacked Saddam Hussein? They said American, British, and at that time they said they have weaponry, destructive weaponry they had, like nuclear bomb or something like that. But actually they don't have anything at all. But actually they tried to attack Iraq and then get into turmoil for several years. So back to the origin, the reason is America, is they scratched Iraq economy, everything, and including infrastructure. So, but Al-Abadi cannot speak of that kind of issue because he is making a speech in the state, in Washington, D.C. He expects investment from the state and also around the rest of the world. So he's just talking about this kind of message. But behind the scene, we have a lot of reasons to criticize the United States of America. Okay?
Daesh in large numbers as before. And Daesh is really running out of fighters. And we're glad to see that. But still, we need probably, if you look carefully, in the Arab world, in the region, there are many terrorist activities in there. Look, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Libya, and other areas. Probably Yemen as well. So I think we have to stay focused on this. And we have to remove terrorism from being used in regional conflict. Countries are using terrorists for their own regional conflict. And that's what gave rise to Daesh. Daesh was not spontaneous. It was not just grown overnight and crossed the Syria-Iraq border. They've been enabled. A lot of support were allowed to go to Daesh to build their capabilities. Then they became this force, this ability to destroy and to kill.
Well, in building on that, we have a question from Carol Morello of the Washington Post, who's asking whether in your talks with President Trump and Secretary Tillerson, did you get the sense that this administration has an anti-ISIS strategy that's different from the previous administration? And if so, how?
I think this administration wants to be more engaged in fighting terrorism, and I can sense a difference in terms of being head-to-head with terrorism.
Okay, he is talking about Trump shooting missile, right? Do you remember that? From somewhere from Korea. She attacked ISIL, right? But actually, Middle East for ISIL is developed by Russia. Okay, and Vladimir Putin supported Assad to eliminate ISIL. He's not America, right? But he can't tell that, right?
I think they are prepared to do more to fight terrorism, to be more engaged. But of course, we have to be careful here. We're not talking about military confrontation as such. Committing troops is one thing, while fighting terrorism is another thing. I don't think now the public opinion, especially here in the US and in other places, would encourage sending troops in large numbers. So I think terrorism, you don't defeat it by military force only. There are better ways for defeating terrorism, and I think we can do it.
So along the same lines, Philippe Gilly of Le Figaro of France asked if you've seen any plan from the administration to wipe out ISIS, and if so, what are the most important improvements? You partly answered it with your last comment, but
I haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't seen a full plan. I know there is a plan. I haven't seen it. We have our own plan, but we need to have a plan together. The region must have a plan to wipe out terrorism, and we can do it. I know there are regional conflicts still there.
Okay, this time he said regional conflict. He said we need to cooperate with region, but he never speak out Syria, never speak out Iran, because America against Syria and Iran, right? Just listen. This is he very carefully speak out his opinion.
We shouldn't be derailing the whole thing. I'm saying we should be focused. There may be some tendency to derail our confrontation with Daesh and getting busy with some other conflicts. I would guard against that.
Right?
So you want focused, continued engagement. You talk about it not only being a military issue.
Exactly.
But he never thinking about against Syria. He never thinking about against Iran. He needs to cooperate with Russia, Syria, and Iran, Iraq, Iran. And but he need this place. He need investment from United States.
And so, looking at Mosul, which has been very much in people's minds and in the news recently, what's the immediate plan for governing Mosul, for addressing the deep divisions that have been left behind by that terrible 2 years?
See, from day one when we planned for Mosul, I've been planning for Mosul for over a year now. We said, look, what do we want to achieve in Mosul? If we liberate it, then what's next? How are we going to govern? Then
not Mosul, liberate Mosul, the city of Mosul. He said, not Mosul, Mosul. Okay?
We said, okay,
City, one of the largest cities in Iraq.
we want to establish peace in Mosul. How do you do that? If you want to establish peace, lasting peace, you have to win over the people, and you have to be careful not to antagonize people or to polarize the situation. So that's what's the strategy, to win over the people. People will cooperate with you, and then they will rebuild their own region. Now, of course, now we brought all the ministerial efforts in looking after the humanitarian need of the people, and we are relying partially on the local authority on this, and of course heavily from central government support and international community. I think the UN has been involved in the humanitarian side, and we have this stabilization efforts, which many countries contributed to it, but still the funds are limited. We love to see more funds so that we can quickly retain prosperity and stabilization to these areas. I think this is the key. If we can show people they are better off, of course they are better off in security terms, but we have to show them they are better off even in their own living, in their economical work circumstances than they were before. I think we have made the day.
So one more question from Barbara Plett Usher. Excuse me if I misread that, from the BBC. Are you satisfied with the pledges you're receiving from the international community, and is this administration committed to rebuilding and stabilizing Mosul?
Yes, I'm satisfied with the pledge, but I'm not satisfied yet with delivery.
You know, you quite rightly talk about the security as...
So this is a very interesting talk he's considering. He just expect investment from United States, right? But who's going to destroy the city? Right? United States bombing, so this city is all scratched out. But America need money, lend money for Iraq. Right? This is strange. You should take responsibility. For example, that's just, Al-Abadi need to recommend America. Why don't you give us back? Our city. But America asked them to, okay, lend money, $100 million US, okay? You can pay us back for 20 years. Oh my God, right? This is what actually scenario is, right? So, all that kind of video is just the same as every Asian country president or prime minister come to Washington. Like Bhutto before, and there's the same place. Everybody came here, and also Aung San Suu Kyi came here. Ask America to get more involvement for those countries to get support, but always who is going to take responsibility, right? This case is one example. Every time you're going to watch kind of video, they be carefully to listen. Okay, he never says that.
Has been critical for delivering on basic services and economic needs. What about you touched on it a little bit, this feeling of being fully included, the many different groups that make up Iraq. How do you build a country and a government that enables that sense of inclusion?
Well, to be inclusive is to treat people as they are.
By the way, he is talking about how to rebuilding their government, right? This case, several years ago, they kicked out Ba'ath Party people. Ba'ath Party is including good soldiers, not only good soldiers, but also they good government officers. But everybody kicked them out. Okay, so there are many people moving to ISIL because those people Sunni. At that time, government Shia, right? So this caused a lot of problem. And before the Maliki government, Al-Abadi is different, but already those people have gone. But very difficult to get skilled people to manage government. They don't have a skilled person to how to organize government. This is the problem, right? Even if we're going to invite people to organize the government and ministers and also officers, not easy.
This has been tough because people after the fall, this only appeared to the surface after the fall of the regime, the previous regime, Saddam regime, but it was there all the time.
Okay, he said, right?
People were oppressed, the Kurds were oppressed, the Shia were oppressed, other minorities were oppressed. So that has produced this agony among the people, which showed itself when the regime has been toppled or removed. And people are very free. People may tell you differently after 2003, but Iraqi people are much happier after 2003 than before. They have this freedom now. They have freedom of expression, freedom to do what they want, freedom of travel. They wouldn't even been allowed to travel before. They haven't seen the rest of the world. Now they're communicating with the world. We have very good communication inside the country. We have mobile service. We have internet. We have all sorts of people having new cars. They have new businesses. The country is thriving.
Okay, we can do everything. Everything free. Freedom. And the Wi-Fi is also, we can use it. Every kind of obstacles is just eliminated, disappeared, but no people.
So I think we have to show the people the wealth is the wealth of the people, not the government. So I'm eager to work with politicians inside Iraq. I mean, one reason, although this has caused me friction between me and other politicians, I slashed the salaries of the top tier of politicians to almost 50%.
Even he cut the salary of officials, cut half.
Their personal security guards as well. Of course, the reason I'm doing this, it may not amount to a lot of money, but this about good governance for the people to see the politicians who are representing them, they're living with them. They're not like they're aliens from different planets. They're there, they're living with the people and see what the people are doing. So I think this we have to move forward with. I tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy. There can be a lot of backlash. The only backlash I'm afraid of is the backlash within the public in general. We have to be careful. That's why probably there is a lot of ideas presented to me about economical reform, which I didn't choose, because it may affect the public at large, or it may affect large sector of the society who are not well off. They are on the sideline, and probably they cannot represent themselves. I think people in office must make their priority to look after the weakest in the public, who cannot protect themselves, or who cannot defend themselves, or who cannot ask for things which they want, because either they're weak or they're not able to. I think that's what I consider is a good governance, and we are moving in that direction. It doesn't necessarily happen now, but at least we have initiated something right, and I hope others will complete it.
So along those lines, there's a debate about whether the upcoming provincial elections for this fall will move the country forward, fresh leadership, perhaps moving some of the agenda that you talked about of federal systems. Others say it might open new wounds. What are your thoughts, and are you committed to holding those elections, the provincial elections?
I hope, it brings new blood. It will inject new people who are not eager to replace the previous people and to take their positions, but they're eager to advance the country, to advance their locality. We are eager to find these people and to give hope. What I found, if you give hope to the people, you can remedy the country. The hope is there. The hope can be little things which you do here and there that give hope to the people, that there are goodness in the government, there are goodness in the country. 2 years ago, we had many thousands of young Iraqis leaving Iraq. Now, you don't hear that. Before, you used to hear a lot of people. Now, people are not leaving the country. So it means people have hope now in the country. They have hope in their future. This is important. Look, we cannot change everything overnight. We cannot. We have inherited many problems. Some of them are intrinsic in our society, in our country. But we must give hope and continue to move in the right direction, and we are doing this.
One of the groups, when you talk about people leaving the country, we heard a lot about the different religious minorities fleeing in the aftermath of the fall of Mosul. How do you expect that they will come back? How do you help them feel safe? How do you rebuild Mosul with that mosaic of religious minorities that made it up in the past?
Well, that makes me unhappy and angry, and makes most Iraqis angry and unhappy. Because this is Iraq. Iraq consists of these people. They are part of our society. They are a major part of our society. And it's wrong to look at people minorities. They're not minorities. They are Iraqis. They have the same right of others.
She is talking about minorities, Kurdish. Okay, Iraq is Kurdish minority. He just tried to equal for those people.
The problem is Daesh has directed their revenge against them, against all minorities in Mosul. Well, of course, even against Shia and Mosul, because Shia and Mosul are minorities, but they are majority somewhere else. So they have done that, and I'm afraid some probably have left the country, and I don't know whether they'll come back or not. But
For this country, Shia, Sunni, both parties existed. But this guy is, Rabadi is, he treated for both parties is equal.
the longer it takes, or the more difficult for them to come back. I hope we have shortened the time for them to come back, and I hope many of them will come back. At least we are working on people inside Iraq, intelligence-less people, to go back to their places, to their homes. This is our aim at the moment. We are concentrating on this, and we are welcoming others who have traveled probably across Europe and other countries.
And a related question from Naomi Kikoler of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, who asks, the Islamic State committed genocide in Iraq. We believe that when impunity prevails, violence proliferates. What will your government do to advance justice and accountability? Will you consent to the creation of an independent investigation into ISIS crimes?
Yes, I welcome that. But it should be inside Iraq, under Iraqi jurisdiction. I think there is discussion at the moment with other countries, I think with the UK in particular and other partners, and we welcome it. I think the wording of the resolution, there is ambiguity about it, so I think we are clearing that for it to move forward. In actual fact, there are a lot of terrorists who have committed crimes. Some of them are in Iraq, some of them are outside Iraq. So I would very much encourage this tribunal to follow up who's supporting these terrorist groups, who have facilitated the recruitment of young people, supporting the group with finance and other elements, who have caused this havoc and these criminal activities. I'm very much in support of this.
You spoke quite a bit about the importance of security and some of your plans and vision for how to ensure that people in Iraq feel more secure. So we have a question asking, what is the future of the PMUs in Iraq? How will these forces be demobilized? What's the plan?
Well, the PMO, the positive side of the PMO, let me speak about this. There are volunteers with their life to protect the country, to fight for the sake of the country. They fought very well. I've seen them everywhere. Wherever I go, I see young people day and night fighting for their own country, for the freedom of the land and for the people. Of course, there are others motivated by something else, probably their ambition to control, to have power. I know some have committed crimes, even armed robbery, kidnapping, and we are confronting them, these elements. What we are doing here, we are having a law. This law to bring discipline, include all those who fought, include them within that institution. We have to apply law and order with them, military accountability, and whoever is outside that will be considered as an outlaw according to the Iraqi constitution. Any group who carries arms outside the state is an outlaw. So I think this is a way which we are trying to format things for the future. We have got these people accept this in general. Of course, there are some who are not happy. They don't want it that way. They don't want the PMF to be out of politics. We insist that PMF should not.
I don't know PMF. What's PMF? Okay, let's continue.
Be involved in politics. You cannot carry arms and you are a political group at the same time. Otherwise, you'll use these arms in elections. Full stop, this is not allowed. This is outside Iraqi constitution, outside Iraqi law. So we are trying to enforce this at the moment. We are organizing, putting an organization for this forum, which is the PMF, and to be controlled by the state. And we have to be thankful to them. We say thank you, but we appreciate what you do, and you are going to include you in this. Instead of telling them thank you, go to their home, your homes, and then they will have arms, they'll be dissatisfied, and they think the country have not recognized their sacrifices, because they have sacrificed for the country, and really you haven't rewarded the sacrifice. What we are telling them, look, we reward you, we appreciate what you've done, this is an organization under the control of the state, you are going to have discipline, the laws applies to you, and here you are. If you accept this, you are within this. If you don't accept it, you shouldn't carry arms, otherwise you'll be outside the law.
Oh, he is talking about especially he can speak at Peshmerga, Kurdish army, but whenever war will finish, should not carry arms, he said. Okay? So, sort of things he's, and this is sort of, otherwise you are outside, outlaw. Okay? He's talking about. So currently, the Al-Abadi is most concerned, worrying about Peshmerga. They are not disarmed of the army, right? So against the Iraq government. So this is most concerned.
It should be as blunt as this. I said it in Iraq publicly, and I'm repeating it inside Iraq, and the majority of the PMF agree with this.
What's the obstacle, do you see?
The obstacle, if people or some insist of being part of the military units and their politicians at the same time. This is not democracy. You cannot do it. This will push others to carry arms, and we cannot allow this whatsoever. We are calling on all to accept this. That's why I think this law was passed in Parliament, and I think even those who opposed it are okay with it.
You spoke earlier about the very positive security cooperation between the Iraqi forces and the Peshmerga. We have a question from Rahim Rashidi from Kurdistan TV asking, first of all, he welcomes you to Washington. And then he asks, you know that President Barzani has decided to go for a referendum. If Kurdistan becomes a state, what will be Baghdad's reaction?
We'll discuss it then.
So, looking a little bit regionally, you had a very positive visit from the Saudi foreign minister recently. How do you see the Iraqi-Saudi relationship going as a result of that?
It's warming. It's warming. I think it's a very good track. At least there is an opening for a very good neighborly relationship. Don't forget, no Saudi official has visited Baghdad since 1991, and not even after 2003. This is the first time. We welcome him, and I think it was good for them to see what's happening in Iraq. Iraq is not under influence of any other country. Our Saudi friends, probably they used to think that Iraq is under the control of our Iranian neighbors, but we are not. Iraq is governed by Iraqis, and they saw for themselves. We called on Saudis to cooperate with Iraq and work with Iraq as neighbors. They are prepared to open commercial and humanitarian relationship between Iraq. they showed that they are interested in helping in providing reconstruction for the areas which is liberated from Daesh. And this is a welcome for us. We want to normalize the relation. Our aim is to stop or to control regional conflicts. There is a conflict in the region. There is a huge conflict. You have Saudi Arabia on one side, probably eager to be a leader of the Islamic Sunni world. You have Iran on the other side, who's eager to become the Shia Islamic world or even beyond. You have Turkey as well competing for the leadership of the Muslim Sunni world. And here we are having conflict in Yemen, having conflict in Syria, and it's been extended before to Iraq.
Okay, he is talking about Saudi Arabia and Iran and Turkey and Syria. So all those people, they are different objectives. So now he's talking about he tried to cooperate with each other, no conflict. But he said, actually not like that, but he can speak out what he's actually thinking in his mind. Okay?
Iraq, we don't want to be part of this conflict. We're looking at our
part of this conflict, right?
After our own interests, and we think we are the victims of these conflicts. What happened in Syria impacted us directly. Look what happened with Daesh when they crossed the borders into Iraq. So I think we are very eager to stop these regional conflicts. It's tough. It happened to be, we are here. Iraq is here. We cannot move it from the map. We are bordering Turkey, bordering Iran, bordering Saudi Arabia, bordering Jordan, Kuwait, Syria, of course. And we are here. We have to live with our neighbors.
Yes, you have a tough neighborhood.
Well, yes, but I don't want for Iraqis to spend their life and the life of their generation fighting with neighbors. I mean, that's not a living. You have to live with your neighbors. We have differences, yes. We have to contain the differences. If the differences is that small, we have that large of common interest we can work on. And I think we're very much encouraging our neighbors to do that. We have an opening with Saudi Arabia. I'm optimistic with this opening. I welcome it, and I hope we can move further in furthering our relationship, even with Turkey, with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with other neighbors.
So I've just been handed a huge pile of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I think related to a lot of what you've been talking about in terms of rebuilding a more inclusive country, the question is, do you think the Iraqi judicial system and anti-corruption efforts will function more effectively now? And if so, could you say how?
Yes, I think we need more forensic evidence.
More forensic.
More forensic. Otherwise, our present procedures are enabling probably terrorists and corrupt people getting away. We need more detailed and forensic evidence to present to courts. We have to catch corrupt people, criminals. I think we're still relying on an old means, while the rest of technology have advanced so far. You have the internet now, and the internet, I have to be frank, the internet, the outlaws, criminal, terrorists are working without restrictions, while law-abiding people, they abide by the law. So these are working using the interests unlimited, while as a state who abide by the law, or citizens who abide by the law, they are using it according to the law, is uneven. So I think we have to work very hard we should not allow them to use our democracy, our freedom against us. We should develop our means by finding them. Forensic evidence, it should be scrutinized what they are doing and present them to the court. I think we have been working with experts on this. We have developed our new system to follow up on terrorists, on criminals inside and outside Iraq. This is important for us. You are not going to catch every criminal, but at least make criminals worry. Make corrupt people worry. They can be caught one day. That's what I wanted to do.
So you've spoken quite a lot about how to rebuild this democracy, which leads me to a question in big letters, which says, do you think Iraqi politicians got the lesson? And if so, how? And I think alluding to the inclusive questions that we've had previously.
I hope the new breed of politicians would.
Okay, we are running very short of time. I understand you need to be off in a moment. There's an interesting question here, though, about whether you would support a semi-autonomous district in the north of Iraq, specifically the...
Semi-autonomous district means Kurdish area. Autonomous 自治区。半自治区。
Nineveh Plains, Tal Afar, and Sinjar, for some of the minorities, going back to the security of... Any quick thoughts on that?
Is a tough one. I mean, we should be inclusive. We have included minorities in their own security. But I don't think you protect yourself by having partition from your neighbors. I think this is a tough one. It has to be looked at thoroughly. We have to build bridges with others and to work with others to be more secure. Otherwise, what do? You build walls, what do you do?
War means they try to be more independent. Right? So Abadi don't want to make war.
Your Excellency, we are very honored to have you here with us at the U.S. Institute of Peace. You have a large and appreciative audience, as you can see. Please come back. We welcome your return visit. We look forward. You have a tough neighborhood and many big challenges ahead, and we all wish you the well for the future success and stability of Iraq.
Thank you.
Please join me.
Okay, she is very good leader, but problem is she do not have many good officers in the government. So because of war, right? So this is he speaks the right opinion, but a lot of problems still he has. And the other issue is following today's session, I'm going to show you video of the Kurdish people. Okay, how to control those people. Right? So, but he's very good speech, but carefully view this video. What he cannot tell the truth, like Saudi Arabia, like Iran, like Syria or Russia. He can't speak out what he's thinking about, right? Okay, this is now is moving to Kurdish Iraq. これは投票でね、圧倒的に独立したいと言ったけど。クルディスタン。これクルディシ。ここ、地図がなったかな。うん。キルクークとかあるよ。イラクの地図がどこかにあった。これ出してないんだ。この時は地図出してないんだ。あ、そうそうそう。それで、これ独立したら、なんだっけ、誰もサポートしてないんですよね。だから、彼らは、だから、例の、もともとは、サイクス・ピコっていうのはね、オートマン帝国を崩壊した時に、イギリスとフランスがサイクス・ピコ条約を結んで、クルドを国家を作らなかったんですよね。 勝手に遷移しちゃって、それで彼らは、トルコと、イラクとシリアに分かれちゃったね。で、3500万人もいるんだけど、それが独立してないっていうのは、世界でもこのクルドだけなんですよね。で、この地域が経済良くないって、キルクークが入ってるね。キルクークが入ると、石油があるんでね、彼らやってけんだけど。今回キルクークはね、イラクの軍隊に引き渡したね。ここに書いてあるようにアメリカクルド人を利用したのね、アイスル潰したの。だけど、結局独立はアメリカ支持してないね。あれな。まあ、投票は結果はね、もちろん独立したいっていうことだけど、クルディスタン自治区そのまま200億ドルの債務があるってね。バルザーニっていうのはこの人、大統領はクルド人なんですね。彼の父が独立宣言して失敗してる。で、これさっき録音したんだ。Currently, there are 33.7 million people and the president Fuad Massoum, the second ethnic Kurdish president of Iraq. Haider al-Abadi is a prime minister and heads a cabinet with Sunni and Kurdish support, something which the previous government lacked. While it was hoped that he would help build the consensus needed to enable the country to disarm the Islamic State group, there have been accusations of corruption and the charge that the allocation of posts according to sectarian quotas takes precedence over competence. Freedom of speech is not guaranteed in the media available in Iraq. There are hundreds of publications and scores of radio and TV stations, but political and security crises have resulted in an increasingly fractured media scene. Television is the main medium for news. Many media outlets have political and religious affiliations. Okay. So this one is this is President Massoum. Okay. And then I'm going to show this one. The explanation is Massoum. Okay, just I'm going to show the video. Next video, the Kurds, the most famous unknown people in the world. Stefan Mansfield. This is Ted Nashville in the state. 2016, May 18. And the Kurds are ancient and noble people who are now the primary boots on the ground against ISIS in the Middle East. They are 35 million strong worldwide. Strong. 今日ね、以上。The largest people group on earth without their own homeland. In this stirring talk, the Stefan Mansfield tells the story of Kurds and does so surprisingly through the lives of three women. Stefan Mansfield is the New York Times best-selling author who first rose to global attention with his groundbreaking book, The Face of George W. Bush, and bestseller That Time magazine credited with helping to shape the 2004 U.S. presidential election. He has written celebrated biographies of Barack Obama, Booker T. Washington, George Whitefield, Winston Churchill, Pope Benedict XIV, and Abraham Lincoln, among others. Mansfield's latest book, The Miracle of the Kurds, is a timely introduction to the Kurdish people that reached bookstores just as Kurdish troops begin standing heroically against the evils of ISIS in the Middle East. The book has been named Book of the Year by Ludo, the leading Kurdish news service. Okay? これ、クルド人の悲劇の歴史を解説してるっていうんで、サダム・フセインの時に6月で1万人以上がクルド人死んだんでね。で、クルド人はペシメルガという民兵組織を持って対抗した。今度は IS に対抗してペシメルガ。2人の女性の話をしています。クルド人が今後彼ら3000万人のために国家を作れることを期待しているという話をしている。で、この女性が出てくるんですけど、非常に素晴らしい女性で、またそれをビデオの中で出てきます。belly, prominent よく使いますね。named after her これはだから、ハイティー。これはローティーと対比で使って、ハイティーってなんか僕も知らなかったけど、早い時間、夕方早い時間にお茶を取っていた伝統的なハイティー。ローストビーフとヨークシャーパイ、ハンプ、ピクル、パンバター、なんだかんだ。裕福な家庭はアフタヌーンティーって。で、それをローテーブルと言って。で、これはハイテーブルで食べるから。あ、これ地図あったね、ほら。これだった。これでした。ここと。Okay, configuration, hanging, body, intense, covenanted, just ちょっと出るべきしてないんで、本当そう、この数字だったね。
はい。はい。
合ってる？covenanted 合ってる？
はい。
Okay, covenanted, well-intentioned, cost her life, fashion, gritty, perimeter, hem, below, liquefy, contort, insane, disfigure, captive, dot, awesome, peshmerga, curan, paradise, immensely, いっぱい出てくるね。marksman, hang in, articulate, これもよく出る。rugged, これもよく出ますね。nibble, hardened, treacherous, insult, influential, relevant, okay, relevant. これは単語いっぱいあるから長いんですよね、きっと。これかな？そんな長くない難しいんだね。
I'd like to tell you a story. Actually, I'd like to tell you 3 stories, but don't sweat it. I talk fast. My southern cousins say that I talk fast like a Yankee on drugs. So we will get through it all in 2-3 hours. There is a people group on the earth who are 35 million strong. They're the largest people group in the world who do not have a homeland of their own. They are likely to be the world's next new nation. They're called the Kurds, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit of their story. Now, you probably know more about the Kurds than you think you do. Perhaps you've seen the beautiful faces of their lovely children all over the internet and in magazines. They're used often. If you eat yogurt, you already know something about a Kurd. This is the founder of the Chobani Yogurt Company, Hamdi Ulukaya. He's a Kurd. You may, even if you're not willing to admit it, be one of the followers of the female Peshmerga, the guerrilla fighters for the Kurds. The word Peshmerga is a Kurdish word that means those who face death. And some who face death in Kurdistan are women. And they have many, many Western followers. The men in Kurdistan have been known as fierce fighters for centuries, and they are, many of them, just ridiculously handsome. Apparently, that starts rather early. Look at this little guy. Come on. Come on. I should stop now. What they all want is a place among the nations. What they all want is a country of their own. And this is what they dream of. This is their ancient homeland. They're in the belly of the Middle East, where the Zagros Mountains form the spine of their land, and where they're between Iraq and Iran and Turkey and Syria. This is what they want, a homeland, a free and independent Kurdistan that they can call home. 35 million of them. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Kurds, and I'd like to use the stories of 3 women to do it. And it may sound unusual that I would use the stories of 3 women, but the Kurds are proud of the fact that though they are a 97% Muslim country, women are extremely prominent in their society. Women sit on the Supreme Court. Women command troops. Women are leading entrepreneurs. Women are diplomats, as you'll see in a bit. And they are proud of this. So it's appropriate with the Kurds particularly that I would use the stories of women. Let me start with the story of a rather unusual woman, a British woman, not a Kurdish woman. Her name is Gertrude Bell. You may not know that name, but look into the face here for a moment of Gertrude Bell. This delicate, Victorian-looking face belongs to the woman who is credited with really being the mother of modern Iraq. She was born in 1868. She attended Oxford. Brilliant, scholarly mind. She mastered 6 languages in the early part of her life, 8 before she was done. She was not just a great mind, but a courageous soul. She has mountains in Europe named after her because she was a brilliant mountaineer. She once spent 52 hours hanging by a rope off of a cliff during a blizzard. That's why they named the mountain for her. And that's also why there will be no mountains named for me. She went to visit an uncle out in Persia, fell in love with the Arab world, fell in love with the desert, fell in love with the people, and she became really an expert on the Arab world, recognized all throughout the British Empire. And during World War I, she actually was asked by the British government to take soldiers across the desert because she was so good at it. Now, she did it in typically British style. Though she was in the middle of the desert, sometimes in the middle of a war, she would insist upon stopping and having high tea and eating her meals off of the finest china from London. Then she would pack them back into her saddle and storm off across. You can see in the photograph here, she's got Arab headdress, dress from London. She's sitting in an English saddle and she's having tea. So this is a beautiful part of who she is. She had phenomenal impact upon the configuration of the Middle East after World War I because she was such a brilliant woman. She also had some very influential friends. One of them was named Winston Churchill, who was, as you can see, Minister for Air and War right after World War I. And another one is T.E. Lawrence. You know him better as Lawrence of Arabia. These were her hanging buddies. So she had some influence that others did not have. She would have had influence anyway because nobody knew as much as she did about that part of the world. But I have to tell you, they made a mistake. These three heroes made a mistake. They had it in their mind to found a new country. This was during a time when the Ottoman Empire had been removed during World War I, and now the Arabs' moment was coming in history, and the Arabs were emerging, all of which was to be celebrated. But these three, these architects of modern Iraq, forgot about the Kurds. Or if they didn't forget about the Kurds, they at least forgot who the Kurds were.
Forgot about the Kurd.
And who they had always been. Because the Kurds are an ancient people. The Kurds are people with an incredible heritage and an incredible culture. They're also not Arabs. They're happy to live in a friendly way amongst their Arab friends, but the Kurds are not Arabs. They're from the Persian side of the Middle Eastern ethnic tree, and they have an intense sense of identity. If you're Bible readers, you may know that the Kurds are descendants from the ancient Medes. They're part of much of the story of the Old Testament. They're part of interwoven with the story of Daniel, the prophet Daniel, for example. They were there on the day of Pentecost, ancestors of the modern Kurds, there on the day of Pentecost in Jerusalem when the Christian church was born. Just a different heritage, a different background than a lot of those who were around them. And so they're a storied people, a covenanted people, a passionate people, people who don't want to lose their heritage and their background and just simply be merged in to another culture, however friendly they might be with that culture. And so what our three European heroes did, Churchill, Lawrence of Arabia, and Gertrude Bell, was they fashioned a nation called Iraq that had never existed before in the world, and they used the Kurds in the northern part of the country as a buffer against Turkey, which was newly emerged from the Ottoman Empire and still somewhat aggressive.
So
Notice
Turkey,
my words.
Yeah.
They used the Kurds. And they used the Kurds to defend and to protect and to be a buffer for the Sunni and Shiite in the south. Kurds are friendly with Sunni and Shiite. Many of them are Sunni and Shiite, but they had no desire to not have a homeland of their own. President Wilson had promised them one. European treaties had promised them a homeland of their own. And so this becomes the basis of much of the trouble that we have today.
They promised,
this becomes part of the problem for the Kurds.
They promised to make their country.
They were used by Europe to protect against Turkey and not given the homeland of their own that they were promised. Gertrude Bell, essentially a mentor to King Faisal, who became the European-placed king of Iraq. It was well-intentioned. We can't criticize from this distance. We can't look in this face, this Victorian delicate face that I mentioned, and think that any harm was intended, but it laid a basis for great harm. Brilliant and magnificent though Gertrude Bell was. Let me tell you about another woman. I cannot tell you her real name, and I cannot show you her real picture because it cost her life, but we're going to call her Nishtman. Nishtman ended up living in the Iraq as a Kurd that Gertrude Bell and Lawrence of Arabia and Winston Churchill fashioned for her. She was born in 1980. That means that she spent the early years of her life under the reign of this man, Saddam Hussein. Now, Saddam Hussein hated the Kurds because they would not assimilate into his dreams for an Arab Iraq, his dreams for a Neo-Babylonian empire. And so he committed horrible atrocities against them. Let me warn you, I'm about to show you some pretty gritty pictures. And on March 16th, 1988, he decided to drop chemical weapons on Nishtman's hometown of Halabja. Perhaps you've heard of Halabja. And in 1988, on March 16th, Saddam Hussein ordered his Air Force to drop mustard gas, sarin gas, tubing gas, other forms of gas on a largely defensive people, his own people, the Kurds, part of Iraq, Iraqi Kurds. You see in this photograph here, the beginning of it, he had instructed his Air Force to drop gas on the perimeter of Halabja. That would hem the people in, and then he dropped the serious gas right on them. These are the billowing clouds of mustard and sarin gas. People died and died horribly. Their organs liquefied. They began to contort in wild ways and broke their own backs and separated their own joints and crushed their own skulls. They just went insane, literally some of them laughing themselves to death. It sounds horrible to describe that in such a way, but that's exactly what happened. Now prepare yourself. Deaths were immediate, horrible. 5,000 people died in about 2 hours. 10,000 more would be horribly disfigured and damaged, and many of them would die in the following weeks. This is the photograph of a dead man. His 2 sons are alive, but grabbing him, don't want to leave. Grandpa is trying to get them to leave that side. The elderly died instantly and froze in place. The sad tragedy of this particular couple is that they died instantly but stayed in that vehicle for days, the neighbors thinking they were alive and sometimes waving to them. That's how the deaths occurred. And this photograph, a man in a home, when the gas began to come into his home, grabbed his son, ran to a neighbor, didn't make it, they both died. What's interesting is that this is now the carving, the statue, this picture is the basis for the statue, at the monument of Halabja in Iraqi Kurdistan. So they literally took that picture of a man holding his son as a symbol of the entire affair. Nishtman lost her father in that gassing of Halabja. Her 8-year-old flesh burned for months. Some people's burned for years. Her mother survived. But then later, her mother was taken captive by Saddam's troops and buried in a mass grave. There are many of them that dot Iraqi Kurdistan. Saddam knew how to do this well. But the Kurds are a unique people. They intend to honor their dead. They know how to find these mass graves. And so Nishtman's mother was found, and DNA confirmed who she was. And she was buried. Nobody intends in Iraqi Kurdistan for the dead not to be honored. They grieve. They put them all the remains in coffins, and they celebrate their lives and offer them to God. This is what they do, because that is their history and that tradition. So what happened to Nishtman? Well, I told you she was born in 1980. That means she's 36 now. What is she doing? Well, you might enjoy knowing, given what you've seen of her sufferings, that she is now, and by the way, the pictures I'm about to show you, none of them are her. These are people she is like, because I cannot show you her picture. She's one of these awesome female Peshmerga. And her tribe of warriors are feared by ISIS because ISIS has an un-Quranic, unusual belief that if they are killed by a woman, they will not go to paradise. These women enjoy that thought immensely. Some of them are the best marksmen and snipers in amongst the Peshmerga, and my male Kurdish friends are going to get on my case about that, but it's just true, I'm telling you. And they are just magnificent, and Nishtman is among them. What's interesting to watch, for those of us paying attention to these trends, is how so many of these female Peshmerga have got Twitter accounts, how they have a huge following in the West. Many of them, as you can see, are pretty. You see this woman holding an iPad. She's shooting during the day and then checking in with her friends and followers at night. And for some reason, I can't really imagine, they get many, many marriage proposals from Western men. I mean, I met them. I think they're awesome, but you better be a good spouse. That's all I got to say. You better hang in. So that's Nishtman. Let me tell you about one other woman. Her name is Bayan, B-A-Y-A-N. Woman I deeply admire. Bayan was raised by the man you see on the right and his wife, of course. Sami Abdul Rahman is this man, a Kurdish hero. He was a leader of the resistance against the regime, as the Kurds will say, which largely means Saddam, but all the years that the Iraqi regime was oppressive to the Kurds. This man was brilliant, well-educated, spoke English, but because he was part of the resistance, he ended up living in the mountains. That means that little Bayan ended up living in the mountains, and so they, on the one hand, had their homes filled with Western journalists because, again, they spoke English and could articulate the Kurdish cause. On the other hand, they lived the hard and rugged village life of the Zagros Mountains, and you can just picture little Bayan here nibbling bread with hardened soldiers and them loving her like a little mascot. This is sort of the culture that she grew up with. Zagros Mountains, beautiful but hard and treacherous. This is the native homeland of the Kurds. They're called mountain Kurds, in fact, by those who try to be a little bit insulting, but it's actually true. Her father, unbelievably influential, helped to build what we now know of Iraqi Kurdistan, when more freedom came, Saddam was dealt with. He became a prime minister of his own party. A really pretty amazing man. Unfortunately, in 2004, there was a double bombing by an Islamic extremist group, and Dr. Sami Abdul Rahman was killed along with his son. A very, very violent moment. Now, by that time, Bayan had gone to England to be educated. Part of it was to keep her safe. She had become a journalist for the Financial Times, very prestigious role. She was assigned to do her journalism by the Financial Times in Japan, where she spent many, many years. And she always thought of Kurdistan, always followed, of course, what her father was doing, always cared for Kurdistan. But she didn't know exactly how she should live that out. Well, eventually she knew that she would have to live out her parents' legacy, that she would have to live out her love for Kurdistan and what her parents had embedded in her soul. And so today, little Bayan is actually Madam Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman. She is the representative to Washington, D.C. of the Kurdish regional government. She is arguably the most powerful Kurdish woman in the world. Unbelievable. She's about that tall. It's all dynamite. She's a cross between Golda Meir and Margaret Thatcher and Oprah and Pink, I guess, if you want some attitude thrown in there. She's pretty amazing. She spends her time telling the U.S. government in Washington how they need to stand with the Kurds against ISIS and how they need to be prepared for independent Kurdistan. And that, I think, is what is important for you today. What does this mean to you? Why is this relevant to you? Well, you're smart, you're educated, you're here, you're socially conscious, and 35 million Kurdish people are waiting to be born into the family of free nations. I intend to help them. I hope you will too. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Okay, next. This one is maybe she's going to on this video. Could Kurdish independence lead to a new Iraq war? Up front. 2016, October 22nd. In 2014, following the withdrawal of Iraqi forces, Kurdish Peshmerga troops seized the oil-rich city of Kirkuk from the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant ISIL. 2 years on, and with a fresh joint offensive against ISIL underway, calls for Kurdish independence are getting stronger. But in the absence of any real power sharing negotiation with the Iraqi government, some are left wondering if the Kurdish regional government, KRG, is making a land grab instead. KRG, with its own executive leadership, armed forces and diplomats abroad, is able to sign oil deal with foreign companies on its own, but the KRG say they are being held back, that Peshmerga are not armed or trained properly, and that they cannot tap into international market as freely as they would like. If the autonomous Kurdish region were to declare independence, what would it mean to war-torn Iraq? Could it speak a new war? In this week's arena, we debate the future of Iraq Kurds. Joining us are Iraq scholar Abbas Kadim and Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman, the official representative in the U.S. of the KRG. This is a lady you see just before format video. And これクルドの議論ね。ペシメグラのことを 独立の話、ディスカッションしてんだよね。これさっきの人。
はいはい。
5年後に独立したいと言ってるけど、イラクの共助10年後だって言ってる。これは、まあ、彼女はなかなか素晴らしいんで。
The Iraqi army and the Kurdish Peshmerga have launched their much-awaited assault on the city of Mosul, held by ISIL since 2014. But with some Kurdish leaders adamant that they'll be keeping any territory they retake from the group, could the defeat of ISIL be the first step towards...
Okay, just a moment. I just going to check the word. Okay. Here. Adamant. Blackmail. KRG. Resentment. Romanticize. Premise, repercussion, cordon, displace, booty trap, caveat. Okay, so this is not difficult. That's all. Okay.
...as an independent Kurdish state and the breakup of Iraq. Earlier, I sat down to debate this with two Iraqi authorities on the subject. Abbas Kadim, author, academic and senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins University, and Bayan Sami Abdul Rahman, official representative in the US for the Kurdistan Regional Government, the KRG. I began by asking Bayan whether the Kurdish demand for independence is in part a reaction to the massive post-war violence that the country has seen.
Definitely our history, and not just since 2003. But our history of being part of Iraq informs our decisions, all of our decisions. And the call for independence is partly informed by that. What have the Kurds in Iraq seen by being part of Iraq? Under the previous regimes in the early years of Iraq, Iraq had coups d'etats, revolutions, bloody transfers of power. The Kurds were marginalized and ignored. Under Saddam Hussein, we had destruction of 4,500 villages, genocide, chemical bombardment. Since 2003, we thought that this was a new era of partnership. But again, the Kurds have been marginalized for the past 2.5 years. We haven't received our budget from Baghdad. There have been many, many disputes. The Peshmerga have never been paid from Iraq's defense budget. There are many, many reasons to want more autonomy or independence.
Let me put that point to you about...
So she's just very clever person, right? He very well summarized history of the Kurdish people, right? She's very smart.
That's kind of... Yes. You've said that the Kurdish leadership is using independence...
He's against counterpart speaker. He's not so much good.
It's quote, as a highly effective blackmail tool. How is Bayan and the Kurdish regional government blackmailing Iraq? Explain that.
Well, this is not a personal thing. I mean, I have all respect to the ambassador.
Institution,
but
the Kurdish regional government.
And I have said that. And I also have said
but
that...
what do you mean by that?
What I mean is that every time there was a threat of independence, not really a promise of independence or even a plan of independence. It's one thing to plan something and say, I'm going to have it on this date. It's another thing to say, I will go independent every time you are being told no, or you are not given what you want. But in fairness to that statement, I believe that it's not just the Kurds, but political blackmail is the favorite mechanism all Iraqi politicians
so let's
are
deal with the Kurdish, since we're here for the
yeah.
Kurdish issue, to respond to the political blackmail point.
I agree that we Iraqis are very good at emotional and political blackmail. I wouldn't say that we're using independence or the promise or threat of independence as blackmail. It's something that needs a process, and we want to declare independence after dialogue and through peaceful means, and that means we need to engage with Baghdad. We don't want to have a war of independence, and we don't want to declare independence in such a way that it causes more instability. We want...
Actually, the current Kurdish people follow on her opinion. So she said, no, we don't want to wage war. Okay, we just need to talk with Iraq government, and we don't like instability of this country.
Want to engage in dialogue with Baghdad, with all of the...
So if you clearly listen what he said, this is actually Kurd people follow on her opinion. Okay?
parties in Baghdad. At the end of the day, whether we're part of Iraq or we're the neighbor of Iraq, Baghdad will be our biggest partner, whether it's trade, finance, maybe military pacts. We will need each other.
And let me ask you both, given that ISIL is still a deadly force in Iraq, being fought on one side by Iraqi forces, so-called Shia militias, Kurdish fighters, the Peshmerga, would a declaration of independence while ISIL is still around not cause instability in the country?
It will, and because after all, independence, one big part of the independence is to set the borders between the future Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq.
Would that be easy?
And now most of the areas at the border are held by ISIS without having clearing these areas from ISIS, getting liberation. That will be, I think it's silly to even talk about independence, because where are you going to declare the border? A lot of the disputes that are still in the Constitution, it says that both sides have to sit and do it. So yeah, I mean,
there's no doubt that there will be disputes over borders. I agree with you, and those are issues that should have been resolved through the Iraqi Constitution's Article 140, which set out a mechanism for doing this.
Sure.
But neither the Iraqi government nor the international coalition led by the United States was interested in doing that.
Some of your critics say that you're using the fight against ISIL to quietly take territory that wouldn't otherwise be part of a Kurdish state into your borders. For example, Kirkuk, which I believe the Peshmerga took in 2014.
Really,
would that be part of a Kurdish state?
Kirkuk, we believe, is part of Kurdistan. Absolutely.
And you now control it thanks to having taken it from ISIL. Does it automatically become part of a
No, we need
Kurdish
to
state?
come to a power-sharing arrangement with all of the people in Kirkuk and other areas. We need to be mindful of the different people that live in Kirkuk, in Nineveh. There are Christians, Assyrians, Yazidis, and others, as well as the Turkoman. There are many, many diverse groups, and in these disputed territories, we need to have a real power-sharing mechanism for them, and they need to be given the choice. But the choice is the key word or the key phrase.
And coming to the subject of choice, Abbas Kazim, isn't the problem that the Kurds have a choice to go independent? Maybe if the Baghdad government wasn't so allegedly corrupt, dysfunctional, incompetent, whatever you want to call it, whatever the critics say, you wouldn't have a situation where part of the country is trying to split away.
well, that's absolutely sure. I'm a big critic of the government in Baghdad. That's well known, and it's my record. But also, the corruption goes on both sides of the border. The KRG has also, the Kurdish or Kurdistan regional government has also many political problems. Indeed, as we speak, the disputes and division within the KRG is probably as big, if not bigger, than it is in Baghdad. So the Iraqi government is corrupt. It has many problems. It has not done well by the Kurds, but also the other side, the Kurdish government, has been also part of this dysfunctional arrangement.
Let me ask Bayan about the Kurdish government. One of the claims that Kurdish officials often make, part of the kind of PR effort that Kurds make abroad, that you're free and democratic, unlike a lot of other parts of that region. And yet you have a president, Masoud Barzani, whose term expired more than a year ago, who blocked the Speaker of Parliament from entering the Kurdish capital, whose nephew is the Prime Minister, whose son is the intelligence chief. Many would look at that and say, that's not a very democratic place.
We say that we're democratic, but we don't say that we're perfect, and we've never claimed that. President Barzani is the president of Kurdistan. He is recognized as such. He is the commander-in-chief, and all of the Peshmerga follow his orders and fight ISIS united. With regards to the issue of democracy, there is more democracy in Kurdistan. There is more freedom of speech. Women have a better position in society. Religious freedom is respected more in Kurdistan, I would argue, than pretty much most of the Middle East. These are things that we can build on. I've never said that we're perfect. I don't think we've ever claimed that.
Abbas, is it resentment on the part of Iraqi Arabs that the Kurds do seem to have this stronger democratic system? They seem to have a more popularity abroad. The Peshmerga are often romanticized in the Western media in the way that a lot of Iraqi militias are not. Does that bother Iraqi Arabs? Is it a resentment of the Kurds? on the Iraqi Arab side?
Not at all. I think that, if anything, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I'd be happy for them to have a perfect democracy and even an independent state if that's what they choose. The only thing is that the premise is problematic. I do not believe that they have that democracy to be envied. We just saw this activist caught, and his head was and eyebrows were shaved for just writing something they didn't like. So that's a problem. Journalists get killed. Yes, there is maybe some freedom of speech, but not without so many red lines that if one crosses, it might cost them their life.
But the problem is, as Bayan pointed out, relative to the rest of the region, and even relative to the government in Baghdad, the human rights situation is probably better there, is it not?
No, I don't believe it's better. I think that even inside Iraq, there are issues. Look, for years, Iraqis have been.
I think the record speaks for itself. I've never said that Kurdistan is perfect. I don't think any of us have. But I think to compare
I don't think anyone's asking for perfection.
But
just
to compare Kurdistan to the rest of Iraq, I think is quite a remarkable statement.
It is a remarkable statement because it's true. Because you are, if you are comparing security, it's a different question. But just if the question is about freedom of expression. Just compare the demonstrations that have been going in Iraq against the government. They even sacked the parliament and the council of ministers and no repercussions. And compare that with the demonstrations that criticize. If you want to criticize Masoud Barzani, you have to go to Sulaymaniyah. And it's really something remarkable.
Maybe the people of Abdel Dahok like President Barzani.
Well, come on.
Have you ever considered that?
All of them? It's not very democratic to say you have 100% support.
No, I didn't say that, but the election results show that.
There have been reports of the Peshmerga committing alleged war crimes. One European diplomat who visited northern Iraq told Foreign Policy last year that he had seen, quote, the deliberate systematic destruction of Sunni Arab property at the hands of the Peshmerga. Human Rights Watch said in a report in February that Iraqi Arab citizens in areas retaken by the Peshmerga from ISIL had been displaced, cordoned off and detained. What's your response to such
there
reports?
was a very, very detailed response, village by village response to the Human Rights Watch report that outlined what happened in every single village.
So you don't accept those findings?
On the whole, no. There were some findings, there were some places where there were negative, let's say, incidents. But on the whole, these were areas that were taken from ISIS. Either they were booby-trapped and nobody could go back, or they were in the front line. They were in the no man's land between ISIS and the Peshmerga. It would be crazy for people to go back.
Let me say this to both of you.
I'm happy to share that report with you. I think it's out there in public.
I'm sure people can see it online if they want to. We're running out of time. Very quickly before we finish, two quick questions. One is, the history of partition isn't a happy one, is it? I mean, from India and Pakistan to Palestine to Cyprus to the Balkans most recently, it does tend to lead to a lot of bloodshed when you partition a country. Are you worried about that?
The history of one Iraq hasn't been a happy one either. We have had genocide after genocide, not just one. It has been an unhappy marriage. And I think Abbas and I agree that people who want self-determination should decide for themselves. I think
Do you worry, Abbas, that if the Kurds do go down the independence route, actually declare independence, the Iraqi government would turn violently against them over borders, over oil?
Well, no. The question is, again, this with a caveat, is depends on what map they want to have.
So there is a caveat.
Yes, if the map that as Kurdistan government now is presenting that goes all the way to Mendele, I guarantee you that there will be war for it. But if the map is something that is negotiated between Baghdad and Kurdistan, definitely, first, the Kurds have every right to have that on every level, moral, political, and legal, to have a
He doesn't deny independence of Kurdistan.
Negotiated, mutually agreed upon map.
This is Baghdad. He is Baghdad side.
So it is the moral obligation of Iraq, the region, and the international community to help them have that and create a mutual.
Final question to you both. Prediction time. Will we see an independent sovereign Kurdistan in 5 years' time, or even 10 years' time?
Yes.
5 years, no. 10 years, possible. Yes.
Okay. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for joining me in the arena. That's our show. Up front, we'll be back next week.
So he's just Iraq side guy, government side guy. He does not say negative. 10 years. And this lady is very nice person, very smart, right? Okay? Oh, very good. Then the key date in Iraq history. And this is Ottoman Empire until 1918. Then British seizes control, create state of Iraq. This is just I told you before. Sykes-Picot, they tried to draw a line to separate countries. So at that time, Kurd is disappeared. 1932 independence followed by coup. 79 Saddam Hussein becomes president. 1988 Iran-Iraq war. And 1990 they use toxic gas, right? 1990 Iraq invades Kuwait, putting it on a collision course with international community. Okay. Collision course. 1991 Iraq subjected to sanction, weapons inspection and no-fly zone. 2003 US-led coalition invades, starting years of guerrilla warfare and instability. Okay, and disappeared. This Saddam Hussein army disappeared. 2014, the armed Islamic State group emerges as a major force in the region and seizes large part of Iraq. Okay. So this we have another YouTube. I toppled the Saddam statue. Now I want him back. Okay. This is talking about. This week sees release of the long-awaited Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq war. Afraid of its publication, our Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen has returned to the country, and he spoke to one man who helped topple of the famous statue of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad, Firdous Square, but now say he wants to put it back. The Chilcot inquiry is also known as the Iraq War Inquiry and was set up in 2009 by then Prime Minister Gordon Brown to examine the UK investment in the Iraq War. で、これでこのチルコットリポートっていうのはイラク調査委員会って日本語で訳されてるけど、そういうことですね。これ反省して間違いだったっていう、イラク侵略するの間違いだったっていうレポートね。で、サダム・フセインは身内何人を殺害した。そのイラクの政治はひどすぎた。まるで1000人のフセインがいるようだ。結局、ブッシュとブレアは嘘つきだった。イラクを崩壊させたっていう、そういう内容のビデオね。これはね。これすごい短いね。
إذا هذا اليوم أروح يم التمثال يعني أتألم وأنقهر ليش أنا يعني سقطت هذا الصنم أعيد الصنم احتمال يعني أصنعه وأعيده لو مخوفا شوي كنت أرجع أنا أكثر من عائلتي يعني أكثر من 14 15 شخص معدوم. كنت فرحان بشكل يعني دخلوا الأمريكان وخلصونا من نظام صدام البائي. سمعت بأن الأمريكان دخلوا ضواحي بغداد ففرحت وأخذت المطرقة هو الهمر شاكوت وطلعت بالسيارة فبديت أضرب بالصنم لأن أمنيتي هي أصف الصنم. قبل ما انسقط صعد أحد الجنود من شرق آسيا خلى العلم الأمريكي على وجه التمثال فعلى مقبلة حطيت علم عراقي. حقيقة سنة عن سنة للأسوأ وبعدين كشفنا ذول الحرامية والأحزاب والقتل والنهي والسلب قتل صدام بس يعني ما شفنا من مثل هاي الحكومة. راح صدام وجانا 1000 صدام. أحس كأنما إحنا العراق مثلا عندنا وبغداد يعني بصورة عامة هم كانوا يدعون بها سقوط بغداد. وهاي الكلمة يعني تأثر من الهواية. لا شيء أكيد كذابين. أي كذابين لأنه هم دمروا العراق هذول الاثنين. بلير وبوش. هم رجعونا للصفر. يمكن أقول لك رجعنا للقرون الوسطى وأكثر. أنا لو مجرم يعني أقتلهم بداية.
Okay, so this is very interesting. They just here saying of saying. Next is Iraq explained ISIS, Syria, and war. The current crisis in Iraq explained in under 5 minutes. There is war in Iraq again, and the US and Iran are talking about working together. And who is this ISIS terrorist group that is all over the news? And religion or dear? When exactly has the world gone mad again? It's not possible to explain a complicated topic like this without simplification. We are very aware that this video is not painting a full picture of the situation, but we hope that it may lay the foundation on which you can try to do your own research and understand how horribly fucked up the whole situation is. で、これはtrickle, peaking, segregate, irony, gruesome, infamous. これよく使うんだよね、infamous。これ意味が違うんだよ。fanatic, medieval。これもよく出てくるね。incapable。それから、mean business。あと、boat。Okay, this is very short video, I think.
Water, would you like to get some water? Really good prices. Water?
Oh dear, just when you thought the Iraq problem was solved because you haven't heard about it for a while, everything's back to murderous chaos and terror. What happened? In 2003, the US invaded Iraq because of its alleged connections to terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. At the time, Saddam Hussein, a brutal dictator, ruled the country. He was part of the Sunni minority and suppressed the Shia majority. Iraq was conquered fairly quickly, but the US had no plan for the country. The until then suppressed Shia majority took over and began oppressing the Sunnis because suppressing other faiths has proven to be such a good idea. Unsurprisingly, a Sunni rebel uprising began, and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda trickled into Iraq, and local forces, often former Sunni military, began fighting the US troops and the newly formed Iraqi state, peaking in a bloody civil war in 2006. Since then, people in Iraq have basically been segregated by religion. So, in a tragic irony of history, the US invasion led to the formation of the very terrorists the US wanted to eliminate in the first place, because Iraq was now the perfect
Okay, just he's explaining the history of the US invasion.
Training ground for terrorism. To understand this complicated conflict better, we need to understand the relationship between the two main branches of the Muslim faith, Shia and Sunni Islam. Sunnis make up about 80% of the Muslim world, and Shia about 20%.
Okay, Shia just only the 20%, right? Basically, Iran.
And the hardliners on both sides don't like each other very much. Saudi Arabia and Iran are the two most powerful players in the game of faiths. They both have no separation of state and religion, domestic problems, and a lot of oil money. And they support groups that fight the other religious orientation. And one of those terror organizations supported by Saudi Arabia was the Islamic State in Iraq, or...
ISIL is Sunni. So Saudi Arabia is Sunni. So Saudi Arabia supported them, and Saudi Arabia is Islamic Sunni, but extreme Sunni, so-called Wahhabism. Wahhabism, beheading or kind of very harsh, rule they have. So those rule is those ISIL imported from Saudi Arabia. The same thing, there's beheading also Saudi Arabia. They are doing for instead of hanging, beheading. Right? The same.
ISI for short. In 2010, the Arab Spring happened and changed the whole situation in the Middle East. In Syria, dictator Bashar al-Assad didn't think much of resigning and started a gruesome civil war against his own people.
So he said gruesome civil war because America is very much heavily involved into starting Syria war. And at first time, they had the demonstration in Syria. At that time, those people, demonstrator, is very much educated by somebody. It means American CIA or something, to encourage them to start a war. Okay?
The longer the war went on, the more foreign groups joined the fight, most of them for religious reasons and with the goal of building an Islamic State in the region. And one of them was the infamous ISI, which now became the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah, first stage of the ISIL, Saudi Arabia supported them, and also America, CIA supported them. So they had a lot of American weapons.
Or ISIS. They had fought in Iraq for years and had thousands of well-trained and fanatic soldiers. They already quasi-controlled parts of northern Iraq and were very determined to build their religious state. And they changed the game in Syria like no one expected. ISIS was so unbelievably violent and radical that soon it was at war with almost every other faction of the Syrian rebel armies. They attacked and killed members of other Muslim terrorist groups. In the territories they controlled, they built an Islamic State with rules so strict that even the hardliners of Al-Qaeda and Saudi Arabia were shocked and withdrew their support. ISIS has been accused of responsibility for multiple massacres against civilians, countless suicide bombings, the hostage-taking of women and children, the execution of their prisoners and beheadings. All kinds of medieval horrors we would rather not have to illustrate. And this lovely gathering of human beings recently decided it was time to take more territory in Iraq. Since the US left Iraq, the Shia Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has monopolized power and discriminated against Sunnis wherever possible. The government of Iraq is widely regarded as being corrupt, incapable, and it's certainly hated by a large part of its citizens.
Okay, he just corrupted, and also he just hate Sunni people. And Maliki is Shia, so Sunni people move into the ISIL. And especially for the former government people and former soldiers is Ba'ath Party and left from Maliki.
The Iraqi army, consisting of about 300,000 soldiers, was created using $25 billion in tax money, but it's not loyal to its government and has been withdrawing or completely disbanding, giving up city after city. Because ISIS has announced that everyone who opposes them will be killed, they have proven they mean business. By June 2014, they'd conquered a big chunk of Iraq, including Mosul, Iraq's second largest city. They'd stolen hundreds of millions from captured banks, making them the richest terror organization on earth. And they are constantly working on establishing a super medieval religious state. Iran and the US are even considering working together to fight them. That's how gruesome the situation is. Events in Iraq show again that exploiting the people you've defeated in a war, denying them power, a living and a stake in the rebuilding of the country, is just sowing the seeds of the next bout of violence. Somehow, we have to break this circle.
Okay, this one is the future. Very short video, but very well explained. And this scenario of ISIL, what happened. Okay. Then I'd like to move into the origin of ISIS. The time is up. This one is next week. I'm going to show you. So any question today? Okay, next week is I'm going to show you origin of ISIS. And this one is, I'm not sure how, it maybe takes 10 minutes or something. And this is the last one, I believe this is the last one. Yes, last video. So next week is I'm going to show you the last one. And get into Syria. Okay? So, any question? It's okay? Okay, finish. Ah, how's that? I just try to